There's a major surge at the southern border. U.S. Customs and Border Protection releasing new stats showing a nearly 100% increase in asylum seekers compared to just last year. And the number of family units detained up by 300%. Now, Democrats mostly ignoring the new data, instead going after Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen during a hearing today on Capitol Hill.
Can you independently make a decision in contrary to the President of the United States on behalf of the American people for what is best for them?
Ma'am, what I can tell you is I take my oath with utmost extreme importance. I always do my best.
Let me tell you, Madam Secretary, either you're lying to this committee or you don't know what's happening at the border.
Wow. And in a dramatic moment, Nielsen describes just how dangerous it is for children crossing the border.
As you know, sir, very unfortunately, because of the increase in violence at ICE, when we have families with children, we have to give every girl a pregnancy test over 10. This is not a safe journey.
All right, against my better judgment, I'm going to go to Juan with you first here. New York Times leads story, border at breaking point. And they talk about the broken records of families coming across. It's a real crisis, don't you agree?
I think that what you have is what we've been calling a humanitarian crisis, if that's what you're talking about. It's not about an invading army. What we have is over half of this 76,000 in the last few months is 40,000 families and an additional 7,250 kids. So it's like 2/3 of this is families, and they're largely from, not from Mexico, by the way,
right.
El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras.
Yep.
And when they come, they're not like running in and running somewhere and joining again. They're specifically saying we're seeking asylum because we're fleeing violence, poverty, and hunger. So that's a different dynamic than the one described, of course, in the middle of the midterms or even now in the call for
an emergency. But you admit that there's a humanitarian crisis at the border.
Oh, yeah. I don't think you can have a...
We have Juan on the record as admitting there's a crisis.
Yes, there is.
Dana, what do you think? These numbers are astronomical.
They were, and they broke records in the first 5 months that they usually would do over a year. And so, what I don't like about this hearing is that you had the Democratic Congress people ascribing terrible intentions to the secretary and suggesting that she has no idea what's going on at the border. I mean, that's extremely insulting. That's what she does all day long. She's got an incredible amount of responsibilities. Part of it was preparing for that hearing to go up there so that she could be berated by them. And look, on the Republican side, they say, you agree with this, you agree. Yes. I think the thing is, like, we should all be able to agree that it's a humanitarian crisis that needs to be dealt with, right? Okay, so the Democrats don't like the wall idea. They think that's a bad one. Okay, so then what else are you suggesting to help stop the flow?
Right.
And I don't see any of that.
Right.
I don't see anything that they're suggesting that would actually stop it.
But I think there are suggestions about increasing space for detention, the judges to get this done, even arguments about whether or not we change the law.
Well, I mean, that's a great start, changing some of the asylum laws, Greg, that have these loopholes where if you're from Central America and you step foot in there with a minor, boom, you're in this country home free.
Sanctuary cities do not help the humanitarian crisis because what you're doing is you're suggesting that it's a lower barrier to entry. So what you're getting you're not getting asylum seekers. You're getting people that think, okay, this is going to be easier. They get raped. They get duct taped. They're given pills in case they're raped. The media drives me nuts because first it's a crisis, then it's not a crisis, then it's a crisis. I realize it's only a crisis if it hurts Trump. All right? So the media cannot be trusted on the coverage of this issue because the issue for them is driven by conflict. If you point to evidence and say you need enhanced border security, they will call you a bigot because they need the conflict to get the clickbait, to make the money. So if somebody new takes over and says exactly what Trump's saying, they'll be behind it. But until then, their breaking news at CNN will be parents deported without children, but their crisis won't be mentioned about the rapes in the caravans and stuff in the New York Times. That's a crisis.
And one of the things you mentioned in the New York Times that I found buried in the very last page was that the cartels and the smugglers send these mini caravans across the border one way, and then while Border Patrol is distracted, they send the drugs through the other way.
That's right. I mean, and you have to do two things. You have to disincentivize people who are coming here illegally this is separate from the asylum issue. You have to disincentivize it. They can't feel that they have access, that they can easily come over. And then the second thing you have to do is you have to modify the asylum laws. Whether we expand the deportation centers or the processing centers, as you said, Juan, or expand our ability there or increase Border Patrol agents, that's all fine and good, but that's not doing anything about the influx of the people coming over. And the issue with the language for asylum is that credible fear. People are concerned that it's too broad, that essentially a lot of these people coming from these countries, what defines, you know, a credible fear of persecution? Are they talking about something that's coming from a position of authority or a leader? Are they talking about something happening in their own home? Is that language so broad now that you have a bunch of people using the asylum clause that shouldn't actually fall under the asylum clause? Because the bottom line is you have to be able to manage this in some way. You cannot have an influx of this many people coming across the border. We can't sustain it. We can't vet it. And it's just not workable. This situation is not sustainable.
And sometimes, like, you're right, it is a credible fear of persecution, but then you have instances where people are recycling children to then just use as props to bring across in order to get
That's good for the environment.
That's good. AOC supports that.